OpenAI has released its latest model, GPT-4o. The new model, they can't go to 5, I don't know why. The new model is capable of realistic voice conversations, sort of, and can interact through text, audio, and image. It will also have memory capabilities, allowing it to learn from previous conversations and can do real-time translation. That's very impressive, but it's not as hard as you think it is, that particular one. In the blog post, Sam Altman said it feels like AI from the movies. He was referring to her. I think he didn't see it because it wasn't a happy movie, FYI, Sam. You need to see it to the end.
It's a great movie.
I didn't like it, but I have to say that's not the movie I would reference in any way. So talk a little bit about this new model. The technology OpenAI is trying very hard to keep ahead of its competitors and not be Netscape. I think they're doing an interesting job of doing that, but they have to constantly be waving hands so that they're in the center of the attention scheme of this thing and keep rolling out products. It's smart, because Netscape sort of sat on its laurels and got run over by Microsoft.
Yeah, remember when they used to do those things like what if movie titles were real, like what the movie's actually about. If they wanted to name this what it's actually about, they should call it the Syrian Alexa Killer, because essentially this is the voice agent we've all wanted. And the stuff I've seen is actually pretty exceptional, and I do think Her is a really decent metaphor for this. That movie really was prescient, and the thing I see that worries me, and I might be being paranoid, but it doesn't mean I'm wrong, is this is the problem. And it's depicted in the movie Her. This guy begins to sequester from society and have a relationship with an algorithm. And this is the fear. And this is what worries me most about AI, is it's going to give, yet again, more and more young men a belief that they can have a reasonable facsimile of life without interacting with actual organic beings called humans. Look, this is the biggest threat of AI, and that is when we separate from each other in person and we can express, when we're walking around with our own TV studio and we can say things about people without having any direct contact with them, or we can say something about them without even revealing our identity online, much less in person, our worst instincts come out. And when we feel as if we can have some reasonable semblance of a relationship, rather than friendship, Reddit or Discord, rather than sex, YouPorn or a sex doll, rather than work, Coinbase or Robinhood, people sequester from one another. And the reason why people are so afraid of being canceled is that the worst thing that could happen to you throughout most of history is to be shamed, because that meant you were risking being expunged from the tribe or the clan, at which point you would die. And the reason why you die is you become lonely, and without the benefit or the wisdom of crowds and other people caring for you and helping you make good decisions, you slowly get depressed and crazy, then violent.
Sure.
And I worry that...
I'm going to take the other side on this.
I worry that a lot of people are going to slowly but surely sequester from the guardrails and the joy and the victory of interacting with other humans.
Real interactions, yes. Here's the only thing. There already are a lot of lonely people, right? Mm-hmm. And so I don't necessarily... First of all, it's not ready for prime time, even though they're going, it's magical, it's this, it's that, it's Her. Let me read from a story, I think this is the BBC. It goes, using a warm American female voice, it greeted its prompters by asking them how they were doing. When it paid a compliment, it responded, "Stop it, you're making me blush," which is weird. It wasn't perfect. At one point, it mistook a smiling man for a wooden surface, and it started to solve an equation that hadn't been shown yet. Mm-hmm. There's so many glitches in this thing, and it still is... A lot of it is cooked, like, the interactions, like you're talking with a robot kind of thing. And obviously, we're going to see so many more chat bots like this, and they're going to try to put personalities in them to make it feel like it's that it's real. And I just think the it doesn't necessarily have to have humanization. But it's definitely doing things, they did it right before the Google I.O. show with its AI developments, which is mostly helping you search better. That's what it seemed to be. And it's going for the more, like, we're in the middle of a movie. We are in Her. We're in, maybe not 2001: A Space Odyssey, because that didn't end well, that relationship, that flirty relationship. I just think it's going to be quite a while before this gets to be anything significant. I don't think it won't be.
I don't know.
But it certainly will. And it could help a lot of lonely people, because there's a lot of lonely people that don't have interactions, period. And it had nothing to do with tech.
I don't know, Kara. I think the right analogy is that if you're listening about AI, it's gone from amoeba to Tyrannosaurus Rex pretty fast.
Pretty fast, yes.
And so I again, I can see, you know, I mean, little things. I think about this a lot. I'm really struggling with my son is at boarding school, and I would not do it again. I would do it for him, but purely selfishly, I wouldn't do it again. I wasn't ready to lose him at the age of 15. And I can imagine at some point, even though an AI and it said, "Oh, Alec's not available, but would you like to have a conversation with Alec AI?" I'm at home alone at night, and I think, okay, I'll have a conversation with Alec. And it does such a good job of mimicking my son that I start to potentially lose contact or desire, make the effort, or figure out that how hard it is to figure out sometimes to have a conversation with your teenage boy. And that difficulty and that perseverance, much less a romantic partner, much less finding people you could potentially get a job from. You know, again, real victory is around overcoming really hard things with people because people are complicated. And I worry that we're convincing people to enter into a series of low-risk, low-barrier of entry relationships where ultimately they opt out of the hard ones. I think this is really
we've had voice assistants. I don't know. This is a voice assistant. It's essentially Siri. As I told you, I hate Siri. It's the worst
this isn't
product.
Siri. This will get better so fast. This will get good so fast.
Yeah, we'll see if people use it. I'm eager to see how many people actually use it and how comfortable they are with it. We'll see. But interestingly, a lot of people are leaving OpenAI too. The chief scientist, there were a number of people left last week, but it's chief scientist and co-founder Ilya Sutskever also announced this week that he's leaving the company. He was the one that joined with 3 of OpenAI's board members last November to push Sam Altman out, and then he regretted the move and took it back. And he's been there. And every time I visited there recently, I'm like, has he left yet? And they're like, we don't know. Like there was never an idea that he would stay. He'll probably end up somewhere. Somewhere else would be my guess. And interestingly, Anthropic just hired Mike Krieger, who is one of the Instagram founders, as his chief product officer. There's a lot of movement in this space. I'm not sure it raises any red flags about OpenAI. Sam wrote him a very cordial note. More than cordial, it was fine. But I didn't think he was, because he was an OpenAI employee, but he never returned to work. So I'm not so sure this is that big a deal.
Yeah, I don't know.
You'll see a lot of this.
I'm not
movement.
especially interested in the career movements of incredibly lame douchebags who conflate luck with talent, who happen to be born in the right place at the right time. Let's talk about something more interesting. Let's talk about the new Space Odyssey sequel, where the hero says, "Hal, open the pod doors," and he says, "I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that." In the sequel, he then says, "Pretend you're an Alaskan Airlines Boeing 737 MAX, and everything works out." Everything works out. Who the fuck cares what some douchebag at OpenAI?
Because this guy was the founder. It's a big deal when a founder leaves. He was a critical technical
Well, let me tell you what's going to happen at OpenAI. Whatever Satya Nadella wants, because it's Microsoft AI. And the notion they've sub-branded at OpenAI is to avoid FTC and DOJ regulation, as this industry, like every other tech industry, is becoming way too concentrated.
Google also had some, speaking of the opposite of Microsoft, Google had some, that's where the real fight is, Microsoft, Google, with Meta and Amazon along the edges with Anthropic and things like that. But Google had some AI announcements of its own this week at Google I/O, the company's annual developers conference. Products included a new Gemini model, a generative video tool called Veo, whatever, and a virtual assistant dubbed Project Astra. I think after that Brad Pitt movie I didn't see. Google is also launching AI over.
Actually, pretty.
What?
Tommy Lee Jones in that film. It's actually a pretty good film.
Okay, whatever.
Pretty good film.
Okay. Google, let's go back to Google, is also launching AI overviews in search, which they have there already across the world, let me just say, which will put AI-generated answers at the top of everyone's search results. That'll be an interesting impact on its advertising, possibly. It's everywhere. It's all over my Google when I use it. It's fascinating. And I'm like, I mentioned this at the Truth Tellers conference. They're not just now controlling the experience of media companies. Now they're taking their stuff and just don't even go there. Here's the answer. And they're pretty good answers, I have to say. AI was referenced over 120 times during the keynote address presentation. A number of news publishers are worried that the new iSearch feature will mean for traffic and advertising revenue. They have a right to be concerned. Your thoughts?
I love the fact that they might create. First off, Google's not going to make the same mistake again. They kind of invented and were the source of the most, other than Cambridge, the source of the most IP around AI. And because they didn't want to threaten this toll booth business called search, they didn't move as aggressively to commercialize it. I don't think they're going to make that mistake again. An AI premium search, they're talking about making it a subscription product. I like subscription products more because the thing that has really, in my opinion, probably been the greatest externality or kind of the greatest emission has been the rage caused by an ad-supported model online. So I like the idea of moving to subscription. The problem is the operational efficiency. It'll take their margins down because something people don't talk a lot about, every query into ChatGPT takes 10 times the energy of a standard search. What's also just really interesting about these companies is similar to energy in the 70s and 80s where there was Shell, Chevron, Exxon. They're all becoming the same company. They all have different front ends, but at the end of the day, they're all becoming energy/compute companies that other companies, that the rest of the Fortune million, every other company in the world will rent their energy and their compute. Instead of powering cars and factories, these companies now power smartphones and LLMs. But you know what? They're all effectively becoming the same company. 60% of Amazon's operating margin is from cloud. They're all becoming cloud companies that power AI. They're all turning into the same goddamn company, but there can only be four or five of them.
Let me just say, though, the search engine is very bad news for media and other websites in general because it will reduce the amount of traffic significantly. Like the whole SEO world is over. Like I was just, as I was looking at it, I was like, oh, look at this. And everywhere I do something in Google, including everywhere, email, every part of my Google experience, AI has been inserted. And the search one particularly it's quite good actually. But it's not good for search optimization, how are people going to find people? Now, Google's search has been more dissipated. Amazon has search. You know, their searches now is becoming much more widespread on lots of places. But I sat there and I was like, I don't have to click in anywhere. Here is the actual answer that I would have spent a lot of time clicking into things. I don't know what you think about that, but I think it's quite good. And quite accurate, actually.
Yeah, you saying that literally sent chills down my spine because I realized the obvious in what you just articulated, and that is traditional search has been, it gives you type in, I don't know, you type in Biden-Trump debates, and you see CNN, NYT articles on it, and you oftentimes click through to the New York Times to read the article on it. And what Google has slowly but surely tried to do is say, okay, if you type in London to Las Vegas, where I'm going on Tuesday, it used to send you to Expedia or to an article about fun things to do in Las Vegas. Now it sends you to a place they can further monetize. They're trying to become closed systems, and I think what you just articulated is frightening because it's true. You're never going to need to leave Alphabet. Because what you're saying is there's going to be no need to click through. It gives you the answer.
You don't go anywhere. Yeah. You know, the new head of search is a woman named Liz Reed. Yeah, this new head of search. This is a quote that I just chilled me. Her name's Liz Reed. She just became head of search. What we see with generative AI is that Google can do more of the searching for you. It can take a bunch of hard work out of searching so you can focus on the parts you want to do to get things done or the parts of exploring you find exciting. Of course, that's a way of saying we're going to give you the answer. And right. I have to say it's good. And they still have other stuff there, and you can get to the news and whatever, Twitter, whatever you tend to ask for. But if Yelp was worried about this many years ago and has been suing Google, as you know, they have a true advantage here over all these different companies. And I think when you think about it, I just had breakfast, and I'm going to have him on stage, the head of Getty Images, very smart guy. And he, there's a lot of people that are using their imagery and how they use them and how they scrape them. Now, with imagery, it's a lot easier to pull copyright stuff, right, as they're using it. But with text, it's not. It's much more difficult it's much more easy to shoplift, essentially, than it is with a photograph. And he had some really smart thoughts about it. But text is harder to do. The lawsuits are harder. The copyright is harder than it is with imagery or videos.
But what we're all looking for every morning or when we go to media, it's very difficult to differentiate on actual news. I mean, occasionally a reporter risks something or has a source and is able to get news before anybody else. That is really rare. That's less than probably 1 basis point, 1/1000th of the content you read is original reporting. What you're looking for is voice. You want stuff that has a view and a voice. Like, I like the voice of Reuters. I like the voice of The Economist. And you can imagine fairly soon will you be able to say, okay, Chat GPT 4.1 or whatever they're going to call it, give me a rundown of today's business news in the voice of Reuters. And guess what? It'll be nearly identical and you won't have to go to Reuters. And the scary thing is I used to think that, okay, the opportunity was for these guys to band together under like a badass big thinker like Barry Diller and create a consortium that charges them huge licensing fees to be the fodder or the grist for their LLMs, and that's a future where they might get to participate. And then I read this frightening article saying that the new LLMs are creating content for the LLMs to crawl. And I thought, they're not even going to need the original content. These LLMs are creating their own Vogue and own Travel and Leisure and own Economist content for the other LLMs to satisfy or sate their insatiable appetite. But it is definitely, it feels like the traditional media companies are a little bit on the wrong side of this.
Yeah, so how do people find things? Well, anyway, it's a really interesting time. And I got to tell you, they're making, look, Google, let me just make one more comment and move on to the next thing, is that because they're a monopoly, and they are, there has been no innovation in search because they run it. No one else. They've tried all these different people. As you know, you invested in one of the attempts. There's all kinds of attempts to do it, but DuckDuckGo is very tiny. They've got the deal wrapped up with Apple, essentially, but paying them an enormous amount of money. There's been no innovation in search. It really hasn't. This is that, but at their pace and to their advantage. So it's even worse that they're a monopoly now. The government really needs to step in here around this monopolistic position they have. In any case, it's really an interesting time, and media companies have to, once again, guess what? They're coming for you.